We abandoned our system, and we behaved the way we usually behave. The question was, would anyone detect that we were sane? The answer was, no. No one ever did.
Did you know I was personally dragged into the whistleblowing about the sexual abuse, trafficking of vulnerable women at the non-profit organization with a false accusation by the female central to my story? I had support from some famous people like...
One man told me about being beaten by the police and left permanently disabled because of a woman's false allegation.
Hello, it's February 2026. Now, this video might rub some people off a little bit, maybe many people. Don't care, I'll get over it. And it's something that is observable and verifiable and repeatable. This almost sounds like a science experiment, right? Or what a science experiment should be, but I digress. Anyway, over the years, for example, I've talked about, highlighted, this study is made famous by Julia Shaw, implanting false memories, the work of Chase Hughes when it comes to, for example, psyops, him being a psyop expert. I've highlighted, for example, the Aish, Milgram, and even the Stanford experiments. And we can even include, for example, the Rosenhan experiment in this. The point with all this is how very easily the human species can be manipulated, how weak-minded they are. And it's just a fact. And I'm going to segue for a moment here. When you look at, for example, how, especially when you see in religions and belief systems, how people say, they think that the human species is some eternal energy being here in what they would call a meat suit or whatever, and human beings are so much more. Well, setting aside the bias, let's just say for the sake of argument that this is all true, then how would they explain, connect, for example, these studies and experiments that I just mentioned? That would mean that these eternal angelic beings, and the human species does not change species to become angelic, for example. That means the eternity is full of stupid. But I digress. Now, when you look at all the different events that have been taking place literally all around the world, I'm going to focus more here on the West, the Western civilization. Use some examples here. You have federal officers, for example, who are trying to protect their nation. And this has been going on, well, literally forever, throughout history. And even in modern history, when it comes to, for example, the United States. And every country is protecting their borders and preventing people from entering, for example, illegally. And you have, and I've said this before many times, you have liberalism has infected even the most conservative minds. So much so now that we see people who call themselves conservatives acting as stupid as those who adhere to liberalism. It's an observation. All sides here now have become bat-poo crazy. These people, these federal officers, are trying to protect the nation, and you have part of the population fighting them, fighting the very protection that allowed them to become bat poo crazy with liberal ideologies. We have a recent event, for example, where it's been all skewed by their side, where you had a woman who was unfortunately taken from life from a weapon that shot a projectile and right through her face, apparently, because she endangered one of these federal officers' lives. And this federal officer, I think it was like 6 months prior, had the same type of event happen where he was dragged for, what was it, 300 meters or feet or something. He was dragged for a long distance by a vehicle, and he had to go to the hospital and sustain some pretty serious injuries because he was dealing with the same mindset, the same stupidity. And these people who adhere to liberalism are so weak-minded, they can't see what they are doing. And this is one of the big reasons why the world is gone the way it has. And those controlling everything are simply opportunists taking advantage of this, knowing that half the population is going to be right there with them, bringing the end of everything. It was unfortunate this person was taken from life, but at the same time, this federal officer defended himself. And where we see the truth come out is when we see even this officer's perspective on video, how this woman looked directly at him and floored, hit the gas pedal, and aimed right for him. And he got hit, but he kind of half jumped out of the way as he was defending himself. The logic behind these people who are doing these things is insane. But it doesn't stop there, though. Let's take a review of this, for example, ostrich farm. Now we have people, for example, who supported this ostrich farm, thinking that they're saving ostriches, and their emotions were being used against them. And you had people profiting on these emotions. You had these people of the farm accepting donations and everything else based on a whole bunch of apparently untruths. And the individual who has the channel, I believe Maverick News, Maverick Live, he does a really good job when it comes to digging up facts, verifiable facts, and even interviewing other parties that were maybe indirectly involved now. For example, people who live there. What do they have to say about all this? And he's given all sides an opportunity to speak. Now, I'm not stating or implying that when it comes to other topics, for example, that I agree 100% with everything he has to say. But when it comes to, for example, dare I say, real journalism, I tip my hat to Maverick News, Maverick Live, for his efforts in exposing all these things. And we see how bat poo crazy the supporters of the ostrich farm were during all that, to the point where you had them throwing gasoline on one of the people who lived there full time, just next door, and poured gasoline all around their house and on their house, one can only assume to burn it down. And if that be the case, then why would he put gasoline on this woman? And it's all on video. Bat poo crazy. Because people are being manipulated, psyoped. This is where the works of Chase Hughes comes in. People are recalling things differently, even almost in real time. This is where the studies made famous by Julia Shaw comes in. And we have, for example, all these experiments, Milgram and the H experiment, all these, it all plays a role because you can combine all these things to see how, as a descriptive, weak-minded the human species is. Now, weak-minded to different levels, to different degrees, but even, for example, Chase Hughes says that he could be psyoped, and he's not immune to it, and this is his expertise. So, this ostrich farm basically took the playbook from the convoy. And I'm going to segue into this now, and how everyone was manipulated and played by the convoy, donating money to those people. And I've said even before 2020, I was saying that all these things are anticipated, they're allowed to happen. So, for example, more can be imposed because they know how people are going to react and what's going to happen, anticipate it, and they have, for example, new laws just sitting there on the table, and as soon as the people act as anticipated, boom, we have to impose this now. No one drafted it up overnight. All these things are just sitting there in little piles. People got played. But just like with the ostrich farm, you can't tell these diehard supporters that, they're still being played. And then you have these fake heroes being elevated and basically starting new careers as truther and freedom types and doing guest speaking and everything else and all this other nonsense. No different than what we see with the whole event with Charlie Kirk. I'm just going to segue into that now. Charlie Kirk, before, rest in peace, and saying this respectfully, I remember just kind of coming across some of his debates and just kind of either skimming through them or watching them just to see how he's conducting it and what's being said by the other people who are debating him, for example. But other than that, he was really, I didn't even know his name. I just, there's his face. I recognized the face, and that was about it. And even his Turning Point USA thing wasn't as famous, not even in the ballpark, that it is now. And how many people have elevated him as their fake hero to the point that he has almost like a messiah status, that he was some great saint, and how he was betrayed by everyone around him. And for example, and I've said this before, how they assume that he was completely innocent. Take, for example, how his 4 organizations under one umbrella has all these anomalies, which I'm not going to say it's all corrupt. I don't know. But there's some anomalies that there's a lot of questions, like money being raised, where it was going to, all this other stuff. And there's a lot of other people who are really covering this in depth as well, pointing out all these issues. You can say, well, he was too busy working. Okay, I can go with that. But then you have all these anomalies about his wife, who I've never met, never talked to, don't really care, but I'm just saying that are starting to surface with older videos of her partying and drinking and conduct overall, which really puts into question the image that they're trying to portray about her now. This guy Charlie Kirk, who's oblivious to that too, perhaps people need to consider, and I've mentioned this, he knew about all this stuff. He was right in the thick of everything. But something happened behind closed doors, for example. And he went public stating, I want to have this audit, I want to do this. And he's turning his back on the very people who put him in that, or whatever position that he was heading towards. They had a spat. He went public thinking that it would protect him. They, whomever, went public to take him out of the picture. Also knowing that the companies that he helped start would skyrocket, and their growth has been exponential since he was taken from life. And there's even projections of his wife Erica Kirk talking about bringing in $5 billion with a B dollars. It's insane, and people are still donating to that so-called nonprofit cause. People won't donate, for example, to someone who needs food and to keep warm, but they will donate to someone who needs a new private jet or yacht. That's bat poo crazy. That is just plain stupid, showing how easily manipulated human beings are. Obviously not everyone, but you have the majority. Majority of the people are drinking the Kool-Aid on all these things. And it doesn't matter on which side of the fence you're on. Not only are both sides, for example, as a descriptive, the liberal types and the conservative types, bat poo crazy and easily manipulated, but as I said, they're acting the same way now, going to the same stupid extremes. Like, for example, this ostrich farm thing, throwing gasoline on someone in their house. Like, really? To save ostriches? Like, I mean, there's so many anomalies with all these different stories, and there's so much more going on. I'm not even skimming across the surface of these examples. Just want to highlight the human species here and why the world is the way it is now. And we have, for example, the wrong types of people obtaining various positions of authority, passing laws under the table, under the radar, what was probably a better descriptive, and making things a lot worse. This is the world. We've given up our traditions, values, and social standards for the days of old, and here we are. People cannot afford to eat properly. People cannot afford to keep warm. People cannot afford very much. Things are getting worse. I've discussed this as well. And things are only going to get worse. And those, again, with generational commitment and monopoly on violence, you're not stopping whatever it is that they want to play out. Real hope is surviving. That's it. Survive life. You want to know the meaning of life? Survive it without compromising yourself. The human species is a flesh and blood species. And I'm not going to get too much into this because this is not a woo-woo or spiritual type of video, but I want to close off by saying those who, as a descriptive, show strength and character and dedication, and say are good, they get to carry on, but the ones that don't, they don't. Really think about what I've been saying, the things I've been highlighting, so you don't get duped by these upcoming influencers and fake heroes and everything else. And if you want to help the right people who, for example, are actually in need, not the people who want. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
I was on my phone way too much. But
because it was a soap opera. It was a drama. It was a show.
The more I watched, the more upset I became of the farm owners. Like, I lost all respect for them. I couldn't listen to the videos. I would just go on and see what everybody commented and about what they had said. Their voices were, I couldn't listen to them. None of them. Jeff, Jim, Katie, mostly. I just could not listen to their voices, repeating things over every day, almost like hypnotically. And these trucks go by with their flapping flags, and they inch you right over to the ditch. My dog, literally, I had 2 golden retrievers there in the back seat of my quad, side by side, and they don't slow down. They drive so fast, and you can move over as hard as you can, but they crowd you. I can stick my hand out and touch the side of that truck. But those flapping flags, my dog.
Just remember, I was one man against many. Fighting a losing battle, but I still fought to the end.
That means press on. That means endure. That means God cannot fail, and you're not going to give up. That's not an option for a child of God. This means you are going to be numbered. Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, when is it going to get easier? When you die.